access the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, Green Lantern fans. This is the podcast of OA, episode number 223. I'm Myron Rumsey, joined by my good friend on the other end, Phil Bova. And we've got another great special episode tonight, Phil. We are interviewing Phillip Kennedy Johnson. We had Jeremy Adams on last week. This week, we're getting the other side of the coin. I am really excited. I thought we had a great time and a great conversation with Jeremy Adams. I'm excited to hear what Phillip Kennedy Johnson has to say.
For sure. And for the record, Phillip Kennedy Johnson got me back into Superman after my long hiatus from a certain writer that I don't really need to name. But that being said, shout out to Phillip Kennedy Johnson for getting me back into Superman. I got right on board. When I knew he was writing it, I was like, okay, I'm in. And it's been great. It's a great book. And I have no doubt he's going to do excellent with the Lantern book too.
Oh yeah. I'm sure. And after reading that first issue, it's a primer because again, it's only, I think it was 8 pages in this first issue. And, speaking of the first issue, that's really the only Green Lantern news we have other than Free Comic Book Day. But the first issue came out. You and I both gushed over it. It's been getting great reviews pretty much across the board. I mean, there's a few people that are, here and there, but by and large, it's been a really positive response. And I got to tell you, I was out of town for a few days and I missed Free Comic Book Day. I missed the launch of the book. So I went down to my comic shop, Heroes Your Mom Threw Out Comics, and they had some of the issues for me, but I was in Rochester, New York for a conference for work, went to a couple comic book stores there and got 2 of the variants that my comic shop didn't get. So I was able to get 6 of the covers. And cool. I did resort to eBay for one of the 1 out of 100 covers. But it was interesting. My comic shop, when I stopped down tonight, they sold all but I think 2 or 3 copies. Wow. And we're talking, they're not open on Tuesdays. So from Wednesday to Friday, they sold nearly everything they had, which is a really good sign.
The first book is usually a good barometer. But that being said, I don't know, I kind of think about this back to the prior first books. So I'll go back to Grant Morrison. The first book I was really tentative. It probably took me a good 2 or 3, even 4 in that run to get me kind of used to Morrison's writing. Right. So I didn't know what to expect, and nobody did, I don't think, and obviously that particular run is, it's 50-50, and then Thorne's run, the first book, I didn't know what was happening right off the bat. I do remember that. I do remember it didn't impact me at all. So if I'm gauging it on how I feel about Adam's book, throughout reading it, I kind of felt grounded, right? I kind of felt like, okay, this is some good writing, number one, and this is a jumping point that's going to begin to tell a good story moving forward.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't overindulge himself.
No, and the art was fantastic.
Oh, the Germanico, come on. I mean, he kills it on anything. He's art, man. Yeah. The guy's talented.
And we know first issue is always going to have a sales bump. You're going to start out really strong. The real time when you're going to know things is a few issues in, 3rd, 4th, 5th issue. Numbers will settle down at that point. But the initial reactions have all been positive. I shouldn't say all, but they've been almost unanimously positive, which is really good.
I've seen a lot on Twitter about it and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, as long as it maintains its heartbeat, that's the main thing, right? I mean, you don't want to flatline this thing. And I have no doubt with the first book jumping off like that and talking to Adams, I don't think he's going to disappoint us.
No, it's funny. It's a situation where you just, after talking to him and listening to other interviews and reading other interviews, I trust him. I trust that he's going to be a good shepherd of the character.
And so, I mean, he really champions his cause, and the best thing about him is, and what's really cool about talking to him is he geeks out just like we do, and
right.
And he's that fan guy that stands behind his character and he stands behind his book, and not only that, he's a humble person, and and he's in the bigs now, and I don't know I don't know if he knows that or not though. Like I don't even know if like if I was in that situation, if I would know I was in the bigs or not.
Right,
But yet,
right.
yet when you are, you're like, and because he was taken aback, and and he's like just humble, and I was like, oh man, you're the man now. I mean, you got some stuff on your shoulders, and I think he's going to carry the weight just fine.
I think so. And we got to bring up Free Comic Book Day because you had a great experience on Free Comic Book Day. That's
Oh,
definitely Green Lantern related. So you got to share the story.
I got to share the story. So number one, first off, Free Comic Book Day was awesome. It was Clark's second, maybe third, second. Um, Big shout out to Apotheosis Comics and Lounge here in St. Louis, Missouri. Fantastic place. Martin, fantastic owner. We've had him on the cast in the past, and real nice guy. He really set a really different standard for St. Louis during the pandemic because I know he's a marketing guy and I know he's a business guy, and he really shifted his sales techniques and he started a delivery service with his comic books here in the St. Louis area, because during lockdown, nobody could go anywhere, nobody could get their pulls. So he delivered. And not only that, he delivered beer. And so it was kind of it was a cool. He still does it. And, it's been great. And big shout out to him. But anyway, Robert Venditti came into town, and I was so stoked. Got Clark and I got my wife, and we went up there and we got a big family photo. Got to meet him and got to have him sign one of my favorite covers of all time. Uh, right there, down there at the bottom, Big V Man signed it.
Nice.
He was happy to sign it. He was he didn't know who I was at first. I walked up and he got a smile and I said, "Yeah, I don't think you're gonna know who I am." And just had a big grin on his face. And no. I said, podcast. Oh, I'm Myron's partner. And he's like, oh yeah. And just got to talking. It was fun. Clark got to meet him. Denise got to meet him. And he's just a really nice guy to talk to. I mean, I could
Yeah.
seriously sit there at a table and have a cup of coffee with this guy and we could just talk about stuff. It was just real laid back, real interesting too. He's he got to see a lot of this. I got to see some of his posts on his socials, and he got to see a lot of the cool sites from St. Louis, and and there's a lot of cool little niches in this city where you can go to and visit. Anybody will tell you when you come to St. Louis, there's certain things you got to do, and Steve's Hot Dog was one. Ted Drew's, I don't think he made it to Ted Drew's though. That's another one, but anyway, yeah, he signed that, and we hung out for a little while and talked and watched him sign, and the comic book shop got packed. I think that's the busiest I've ever seen it on any day I've walked in. So
That's great. He remains the person we've had on the show the most. I think we had him on a record 6 times during
yeah,
his run on he did the Green Lantern book and then he did Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps. But I think we either had him 5 or 6 times. I know we had an episode that I titled V for Venditti, and that was his 5th time. And I think there was one more after that. Just a genuinely nice person that wouldn't say a bad word about anybody, even when he had frustrations with dealing with some of the things in the internal politics and stuff of writing for DC Comics. Just a wonderful guy who wouldn't say anything negative about anybody. Just a class act.
well, all these guys are in a group of their own, and they talk to one another, which is a cool thing because Adams mentioned that he met Venditti and they share this common group among them, and it's I don't know. As a fan, you want to try to find your niche and try to get in there, but at the same time, you really can't because they're collective and what they're doing. They're always going to share something that we as fans will never be able to touch, except just to talk to them, and pick
Yeah.
their brains and stuff. But just all these guys are just great groups of guys, and great writers, man, and just I can't thank them enough for what they do, and I can't thank them enough for taking the time to, come on here, and even Venditti for, you know, just bantering with me for a while. I do have to say though, if he's listening or if he ever gets to listen to this, I do want to get him to sign a Renegade one. I need to get issue number one, the first issue of Renegade, and I want to get him to sign that because that was my favorite run by Venditti. So
Cool.
anyway,
Cool
FCD
stuff.
was awesome.
And also we got some good feedback on our first video podcast. Pretty good feedback. One of the things that I know I need to do is I need to get a better camera. I was looking at my camera and it's only 720p. So I mean, I think I look better grainy, but I'm definitely going to get a better webcam, and I need to do something about the lighting in the room I'm in. I usually have this corner of my office a little dark, and it's perhaps a little too dark for video. So I need to do something there. And but we'll make improvements as we go. I think if the response to the video format is what I expect it to be, it may be our normal thing going forward for YouTube at least. And then we'll take the audio, and I've got to do a little editing with it and dump it down to MP3 for all of the audio platforms that we've been accustomed to publishing to. But so we're not going away from the audio format. We're not going to do that at all. But rather than record it where we're on Skype, that's what we did before. We'd be on Skype and just record the audio. We're just using Zoom and going the full video route, and we'll see. If it ends up being more work than it's worth in terms of the response, then we'll stop. But I kind of enjoy it. It gives another level of things, and one of the things I can do that I can't do in the audio format is pull up graphics. So one of the things I goofed up on is when I was talking about the Green Lantern ornament last time, I should have put a picture of it up. But I'm learning, so it'll get better as we go on. So I hope people will bear with me, and we're not going to be flashy like some of these shows that have been doing stuff for quite a while on video.
We don't need to be. We just I need to get a little nicer set up. However, keep in mind, listeners, that I'm in the process of buying a house. So at some point, this little gravitas behind me is going to be in shambles, and I'm going to be in the middle of moving, and I'm probably not going to have a set zone. So while we're in the while him and I are in the process of YouTubing it, there might be some like blank screens behind me.
All right, my friend. Well, I'm excited to talk to Phillip Kennedy Johnson. We've got some interesting questions, I hope, for him. And we'll be back after the interview and wrap things up.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
All right, and welcome back to the podcast of Oa. Last week we had Jeremy Adams on to kind of kick off the upcoming launch of Green Lantern #1 that has since come out. And so tonight we're joined by author Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Phillip, welcome to the podcast of Oa.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for having me.
So exciting that the book is getting rave reviews.
Thanks. Yeah, most credit to that, to the other creative team. Jeremy and Zermanico are just crushing it. But yeah, getting to work on the John story with Montos is a huge privilege. And I mean, probably one of my favorite things about the book is how different the two stories are, and how, in my opinion, how well suited the stories are to their respective characters.
Yeah, and they are different, but they're facets of the Green Lantern mythology. If you've been a fan for a long time, and I've been reading Green Lantern for 50 years, you kind of get used to that. Everything is cyclical. You've had years where Green Lantern has been all about the space cosmic stuff. You've had years where it's been Earth based, and this is really a nice blend. So I told Jeremy, and I'll say it to you, when I picked up this issue and read it, DC sent us an advanced copy, and the first thing I said after I read it was, I feel like I'm home again.
Oh, good, man. That's such high praise. I'm glad to hear that.
So,
I mean, there's always going to be, comics are about the illusion of change, right? There's going to be these big swings where something crazy happens and everything totally changes. I mean, in Action Comics, the War World Saga is an example of that, where it's like Superman's on this other planet and he's got no powers practically, and he's a slave and everything's different. But I don't think anyone believed that was going to be the case forever. It's just something crazy happens. There's a big change. We get to see who the character is through that new lens, but then ideally we bring it back to what people know and love, and there's kind of this very slow glacial change as far as who the character is and their development, because it just goes on for so many years.
It's funny that they used to be the taglines of "Nothing will ever be the same again," and you'd see that in the
right.
It's like, sure it will.
Yeah, bullshit.
Well, and that just adds richness to the story and to the character when you present it like that too, and the magicness of the illusion. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's when the character's been around for such a long time, there are things that happen that slowly impact the direction of the character. Like when Superman was first around, the whole dynamic between him and Lois was so completely different. It was like he was gaslighting her all the time, just like playing pranks on her. It was like, haha, if only she knew I was Superman. And she was kind of shitty to him all the time. He's like, oh, Clark's the lame wimp guy, and I'm so into the big jock super guy. And that has slowly changed. Like now they're married, now there's a kid, but it took forever. And there's stuff like that with Hal and John too. I mean, there have been things that define their character very slowly over time, which has led them to be so different now, which is, really sets us up nice. I mean, now that like the stuff that happened in Coast City with, blown up, and John blowing up the planet, and adding the military background, and everything is so different from where it began, but it took, generations for those changes to happen.
I think those two characters complement each other well. And I think that's what makes them a good team. I think that's why people are excited about the Lanterns TV show that we're eventually going to get on HBO Max, is we're going to get to see them together as a partnership. Yeah. I've often looked at those two as having a dynamic very similar to, the
Murtaugh Riggs, Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, Lethal Weapon stuff. Only it's not an age difference. It's Hal's the Riggs guy who breaks the rules, and he's the experienced guy in this case. And John is the guy that comes in and he's expected to be something really serious and noble. And you got Hal being Hal. And it kind of, it's a bit of a oil and water, but it's also a good combination. So
yeah, Hal's the guy who shoots from the hip, and he's a test pilot, and he's just kind of, he goes with his gut all the time and just takes these crazy risks. And not to say that John doesn't take risks, but he's in it for duty, like he's a man of duty. And everything about his character is that way. Like there's always this discipline to him, and it kind of makes it easier to make his story. I feel like his story should have this kind of epic mythos kind of quality, not just because of who he is and his devotion to duty, but also, those developments that have come into his arc through the Jeffrey Thorne run, like that was a very mythology heavy kind of approach that, for better or worse, has just really changed John's place in the Lantern mythos, in my opinion. Like it's too big of a, I mean, I wanted to kind of swing it back like a post-War World Saga type thing, like bringing it back to what is familiar with John, but we do have to acknowledge the little differences that are there now because of how big and epic a lot of that stuff was.
Sure. And it's an ongoing continuity. You don't want to throw something out. You just have to continue. You got to pick up the ball where it was dropped and run with it.
Exactly. Got to respect the character.
After reading the first issue, there's really an obvious connection between this story and the Dark Crisis World Order Justice League book that you did last year, particularly with the Battle of the Bright Revenant. So if I'm a reader who didn't read that story, let's say for whatever reason I missed out that issue, is there anything that would be good as a reader to know going into your story?
There's nothing that they need to know. The biggest influence, so one big departure of this book for me compared to a lot of my earlier stuff is I tend to rely, like some of my influences are things like Tolkien's work, but not just Middle Earth, like things like his translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and Finn and Hengist and the Fall of Arthur and other stuff. I really love mythology and Norse mythology and the more modern mythology of Dune and things like that. Those are the things I really draw upon, and I love that shit. But for this, I want to do something really different, and I'm relying more on 80s action movies.
I like it.
So you're going to see a lot of influence by Predator and Terminator, especially.
Cool.
So with both of those movies, especially with Terminator, you get the sense that you're getting dropped kind of in the middle of an ongoing saga that's been going on for generations, but you don't need to know all that stuff. You don't need to see the future to get what's happening. And what I'm doing with these backups that you're seeing now in the back of the Hal book is you're kind of seeing like a little prelude that's happening in the quote unquote future, like John Connor's future. Mm-hmm. It's kind of setting up where we're really going to start, like properly start with Green Lantern I'm not sure. Have we announced the name of the new series yet?
I've heard Green Lantern War Journal is one thing
Okay.
I've heard.
All
Is
right.
that
Well,
is that accurate?
That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Is there seemed to be some confusion about about what the title is, and I was like, do we have an
Yeah.
official title? Is it official?
I'm not sure where that came from, but yeah, the backups are called Rise of the Revenant Queen, and that's a character that was very briefly mentioned in Action Comics in the War World Saga. There was like a storyteller that mentioned her, and that was all to kind of tee this stuff up.
Cool.
So she's mentioned, but then the proper series begins with Green Lantern War Journal issue 1, and that is kind of the beginning of the quote unquote movie right then.
So I would imagine with you building on John Stewart's character moving forward, maybe not just so much with these preludes, but maybe when you get into his book heavy, I hope we'll begin to see instruments of his military background coming out, because I've missed that, and I don't feel like we've been given that a lot in previous runs.
Yeah, well, yes, it's definitely going to be there. That's in the next issue. You'll get a sense of that in number 2, actually. In issue 2, he refers in passing to his military service to kind of make sense of what he's experiencing now.
Okay.
And is this a spoiler? Not really. So something that I've seen a lot of people come back from service. You can almost pick them out. Not everybody, but there are people that come back from a deployment, and you can just tell that they've been in a place like a kind of a hurt locker situation where they've come out of a situation where they're just everything's so loud and crazy, and you're having to check like not just the whole landscape, but above you and like behind you, and IEDs can be anywhere. Like there's no peace.
Shut off switch.
There's no security anywhere. You're just like on for like 18 months or a year or whatever it is. And then you come home, and that level of intensity is just your baseline now. So when you come home and there's no real noise, like nobody's shooting at you, you're safe. There's nothing's going to blow up anywhere. The cars on the road are all just going where they're going. No one's worried about you. There's this thing that happens where people sometimes just try to get the intensity level back where it goes, and they speed like sons of bitches, or they get really mad about nothing, or like there's so many motorcycle accidents happen after guys get home from that stuff. And it's not like they're trying to drive like maniacs. They just like their intensity levels are all out of whack.
It's got to be, I mean, I think a little bit about like the Bourne movies. I remember like in the first Bourne movie, Jason Bourne is in a diner, and there's a scene where he's taking in all of these notes and bits of information about everybody around him, because he's on. He's always on duty.
Yeah, he talks about how to, he's figuring out how to kill everybody all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not trying to paint John in that light, but
No.
But the whole thing about the intensity thing, he is kind of experiencing some of that, because he's so used to being a superhero on whose shoulders everything is riding all the time. Like the cosmos needs you, and if you can't do this thing, billions die, or this whole universe winks out of existence, whatever. And he goes home and he's just building a shed, and he's trying to make sense of it again. So we'll see some of that. And as far as things like just military jargon and all that is the one thing. Well, I guess mostly just like in the cartoon, but there have been a lot of times where people kind of just boil him down to the ex-Marine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And all you get, as far as, and I get it, like if you're doing a team book, you have to, there's a certain element of just conciseness that has to be there. Like a lot of their lines can be very brief. There's a lot of, just brevity is just key with books like that. Like how do you get across who somebody is where I hardly have time for them to speak at all in panel. So people just bring it down, like Superman says something hopeful. Batman says something scowly about his parents. Diana doesn't use contractions. And John says something soldiery, like as imagined by civilians.
Yeah.
So there is going to be some of that, but I'm going to try to make it sound a little more legit, not so on the nose, and not make that his definition like he is sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and that's, you've mentioned a couple of interviews saying that sometimes John can be perceived as one note, and it's true. And you have people like myself who've read John from when he first appeared on, and we're used to the architect John, and then you've got people that come in from the animated series, and their expectations is the Marine John, and trying to parse it is difficult. And so writers can fall into a trap going too heavy in one direction or the other. But I think you having a military experience probably will help it to be tempered, a little more nuanced.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm trying to thread the needle between those different elements of his life. There's a mother and a sister that occasionally get mentioned, and I'm going to try to bring some of that in. Well, you've seen the mother already, and the sister, a different, like an alternate universe version of the sister, was very important in the one shot. So we'll get into all that stuff too. But yeah, I'm trying to show like a much fuller picture of who John is, hopefully in a way that other writers can then draw upon to tell fuller expressions of that character in the future.
But he hasn't been given a really good supporting cast. He's almost been supporting cast versus getting that development. So seeing his mother in that first issue just was really, it touched me a little bit, just because my own mother isn't around, and when I saw her, I almost saw my own mother in her. And so it kind of touched me there, but I'm glad to see that you're going to do something with the sister too. Now, you were on the Lantern Cast not too long ago talking to our good buddy Chad, and he messaged me earlier and he goes, there's something I forgot to ask him. Can you work it into your interview if you could? So I'm going to ask it, since it's tied into characters related to John or related to the Lanterns. And he was saying that, there's that story you did in the House of L one shot during Future State that introduced Rowan Kent and the idea of a coalition of lanterns. Is that going to factor in anywhere down the road?
Not on this run. And actually, I would disagree with that. Like, there's the whole coalition. There's not really, at least not on panel. There's not a coalition of lanterns in that. I think that might have come into play in Legion. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But she's a blue lantern. Yeah. So that it does indicate that there is still, like, blue lanterns are still around, and that they're a little more beefy than they are now necessarily. Let's see. What else can I talk about that? Yeah, the emotional spectrum stuff has been not played out, but certainly thoroughly explored. And this one is going to be more of a back to basics kind of, like, this is not the Arrowverse that we're doing with the War Journal. It's more of like, this is Terminator. Like, this is a film length idea.
And I think a lot of comic fans are happy to hear that we're, that some people call it the Skittles Brigade, the emotional spectrum stuff, because it was so predominant for so long. Not that it wasn't good, but we want to see what else there is, right? So yeah. I think there's a sigh of relief seeing that you and Jeremy are kind of, it's had its place, but look, there's a whole big universe out there.
Yeah, I feel like it's important to get back to basics sometimes, and it's the time for that, in my opinion. I think that Jeff ran wild with Thorne with John as far as what to do with him. Like, he clearly had this whole other vision in his mind for a long time about what and who John is, and he really explored a lot of that in his run, which I think is great. But now, I'm sorry to keep bringing up Warworld Saga, but that was such a departure from the usual thing. If I were to then jump from that into another thing where he goes to some other planet further away from home, and it's even less familiar, that would have been a misstep. So it's important to get back to Metropolis now. So with this, I felt like it was important to get to know more about John, who he is as a character. Like, we know who Lois Lane is, we know who the Kents are, the parents, we know that whole supporting cast, but I didn't know shit about John's mother, except that she was a civil rights leader apparently at one point, or like worked in civil rights and politics. And the sister is brought up pretty rarely. And I just don't know enough about John. And in fact, I reached out to Jeffrey because of that. I feel like I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this gig. I don't really know much about John yet. The versions I've seen of him, like, I have this comic from him back in the day when he's an architect. And then I see everything of him now, and it's very different. And I just don't feel like I'm just getting these, like, surface level depictions. Like, you tell me who John is. Let's talk about John. And Jeffrey talked my ass off about who he thought John was, about not just his history, but like who he is at his core, like what he wants, what he's afraid of. And it was super helpful. And I between that and just reading the stuff I read after that, I got to know John much better. And now, I mean, I'm not going to be one of those guys who's like, here's my favorite, this one's my favorite, and all the rest of them are lame. But I definitely have this great love of John now that I didn't have before. I grew up with Hal as my guy. And I hated Guy. That guy was such a jerk. Because again, I was just seeing him as I saw him as the lawyer in Emerald Dawn.
Emerald Warriors, maybe.
I mean, this is
Emerald
like
Warriors.
it might have been his first. It might have been his first appearance.
Oh, you're talking way back then, yeah.
Way back, yeah.
Yeah.
This is way back, and he was in jail. Hal was in jail, and Sinestro was like, "We got to train you up," and his lawyer is Guy Gardner, right? I'm not.
Oh yeah, that was Emerald Dawn.
Yeah, Emerald Dawn. So he's nothing like Guy Gardner that we all know.
No.
And then next time I see him, he's got the bowl cut and he's a huge jerk. And I'm like, what happened to this guy? All my stuff was like all these old, like hand me down garage sale books. So I was tortured
in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, I guess something.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But now I had to kind of, learn a lot more about who everyone is. Cause to me, it was always Hal. And then getting to know John was really fun.
It's like Green Lanterns are like ice cream. Everybody loves ice cream and we can like more than one flavor. So, I mean, come on.
Well, and at the end of the day, there's so many different flavors. I mean, you look what you have to choose from, I mean, it's just cool that you guys got to write the two top tier characters,
Yeah, thanks.
I think a lot of fans, and I think Myron would probably echo this, are hoping for appearances from other quote unquote Earth Lanterns at some point down the line. Guys such as Rayner, Gardner. I don't know whatever happened to Simon Baz, but Jessica Cruz. Not sure if that's on the itinerary. Not sure if you can even answer a question like that, but I'm sure a lot of people want to know if we're going to see any of these guys.
I probably shouldn't say. I will say right now, for me personally, the mission statement is very clearly on John.
Right on. Okay.
Not to say we're not going to see other characters, of course.
Sure.
But the characters that I'm most intent on using are the ones that we don't know yet, like his family.
Right.
And there's still this kind of these missing pieces in John's history, at least to me. I don't know the books as well as you guys, I'm sure. As far as the older issues that are missing from my collection, but there's kind of these disparate pieces of John that kind of don't fit, and I want to make all that fit. I want to put it all together and see him as a more complete character. As far as the other Lanterns that we've seen, so far, at least in the backups, and a little bit to come in the main series, we're going to see some of the multiversal stuff, the ones from John Stewart's universe.
Okay.
That was really fun to show in that one shot, like different DC universe characters that in that world have become Lanterns, because that was a world in which there was no Justice League, and Green Lantern was the only like Superman they ever knew. Like Green Lantern was the superhero of Earth. And then he created that team, the Watchtower, that was their whole, just a Justice League of Lanterns, basically, and had people like Natasha Irons and Jason Todd and Kyle Rayner. Like it was just a very different lineup.
Did you get into some of the animated stuff to get some influence for John?
Not really.
It's a little different from the comic books. Me and Myron talked about that a lot.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the versions in which they didn't have time to flesh them out as much as I would want them to be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'll try to acknowledge it, but it's going to be more influenced by the books for sure.
And we do see a version of Guy Gardner in the first issue.
Yeah, exactly.
A version.
Yeah,
and
like
Shepard,
Qui-Gon Jinn, Guy Gardner.
Yeah, good analogy. Shepard is a new character. I don't recall seeing him before.
Yeah, he's new.
Is it a Mass Effect influence?
No.
Okay.
After I wrote him like that, I was like, man. The name just jumped out at me. I was like, this is a good name for a science fiction-y character. I don't know. I think it was. I think that name actually grew out of like Gardner. Like, there's got your Gardner, you got your Shepherd, you got your Carpenter, you got your whatever. And but no, I don't know. It just felt like the name. But no, that was not on purpose.
So I have to ask you, this is almost a non-Green Lantern related question, but when I read comics, I like to listen to movie soundtracks, and I understand you like to listen to them when you write.
Not often. Sometimes.
Not often? Okay.
When I was writing Alien, I did, because I have those LPs.
Gotcha.
Movie scores or soundtracks?
Scores.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I'd put on score. Yeah. Soundtracks, I find those very distracting because it's usually a list of like individual songs, and there's a bunch of lyrics, and it's just more.
Yeah. I meant
pay
I meant
attention.
scores. Yeah, I meant scores.
Yeah. So when I do listen to music, it's film scores. Well, actually, I have LPs to. I have the El Mondo set for the video game The Last of Us, and I'll listen to that sometimes. That's a beautiful score.
It really is.
And it's got a very
is.
distinct kind of bleak but beautiful kind of sound to it. So when I'm writing something that fits that, I'll listen to that. Let's see. Now that I'm writing Hulk, I'm listening to a lot of metal music. That's influenced by not while I'm writing, but more like in between, actually. That's influenced by the artist Nick Klein has a love of metal music. He used to be a musician too, and maybe he still is. I'm not sure actually, but he knows metal music better than me, really. But I know some of that stuff too. And he designed Hulk based on Danzig in a way. Like he gave him long hair.
I remember Danzig,
Hulk, and like Kurt Cobain banner kind of. So I've been listening to metal music lately because of that, and also for my son who's learning to play drums. So we'll listen to stuff. And it's funny to listen. It's funny he'll get into my YouTube channel and just kind of click around based on what else is in there. And I've been listening to all this Hulk stuff, and so he's discovered Danzig and like old Misfits and stuff like that.
Good stuff.
Yep. So I'm like, are you playing How the Gods Kill right now? Yeah.
And for those that may not know, you play an instrument. You play the trumpet.
Yeah, my quote unquote day job is trumpet with one of the military bands in the Capitol.
That's really, really cool, man.
Thanks.
That's really, really neat.
Thank you. Yeah.
My son used to play the violin when he was in high school. And then, of course, he gets out of high school. And then he's in that little pathway between not sure what to do and what direction he wanted to go. And then involved in that, doesn't play the violin anymore.
Sure. Well, that's how it usually goes, right?
Yeah.
But even if, I mean, who plays an instrument their entire life? Like it's pretty unusual if you're not doing it for a job.
That's true. That's very true.
And we thank you for your service.
Still good. Yeah, of course. Thank you. It's an honor. But as far as like quitting the instrument later, it still gives him still gives him that appreciation for it that he'll always have, and the discipline and the just being a part of a team and being really, really keyed into what everyone else with you is doing, like learning everyone else's part while you're learning your own. It just makes you so much better at I learned every lesson I needed to know about being a good soldier, about being a good musician. And I mean, some of that went the other way too after I got in.
I got a lot of family members. My wife's dad was in the military, her mom, her brother is still in the military. He just now is getting stationed. He's actually leaving Vegas. He's flying in here with all their kids, and he's getting stationed in Hawaii now.
Oh, wow. Cool.
My uncle's retired military from the Navy. My other uncle is retired Army. I never was in. I never served. That's one regret I've always had was not going into the services after I got out of high school. But back in the 90s, kids didn't know what the heck to do with themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not for everyone. It doesn't suit everyone. It's kind of hard to even tell if it's going to be for you until you do it. You know, like my brother got in. He just did one enlistment and it didn't suit him at all.
And that's what I try to tell where I teach at, where I'm an administrator at. We got an ROTC program, and a lot of the kids, they run through the program and they're like, oh, this just isn't for me. And I'm like, you got to figure it out sooner or later, but at the same time, don't cut yourself short. Maybe run through the program and get through that before you decide on whether the military is going to be for you or not, or whether you're going to go further, But I would have always advised them to stick with the program they're in just to see it out before jumping to make a rash decision by not going that route. So,
yeah, no, that's fair.
So the Green Lantern John Stewart book that's coming out later in the year, it's still October, if we understand correctly. Is it a mini or an ongoing?
I don't know if I'm supposed to say or not, actually. And I will say it's not a mini.
Okay.
I'll say that. It's not what you consider a mini. As far as how long we go, I don't know. I feel like that decision will be made creatively. Like it's not. Yeah, I mean, if it's completely selling gangbusters and people are just loving the crap out of it and fans just demand more, we might take a story that's slated for a certain number of issues and figure out how to turn it to lead into another arc or more arcs. But otherwise, I don't know. I will say when they first got me on, I'm just busy as holy hell right now. And I signed on for a certain, not like officially signed a contract for a number of issues, but expecting a certain number of issues. And then there was a conversation, like I saw the calendar and I'm like, that doesn't look the same. That's not numbers that we talked about. And like, oh, well, is that okay? I'm like, I don't know, I guess. I'm awfully busy. But I mean, if it gets to be just more than I can capably do, if I feel like I'm not doing my best work because it's just too much work, I'll find a way to pass it on to someone else who has the time and the love for it.
Is the backup going to run in every issue leading up to the launch, or is it just set for a certain number of issues?
Yeah, the last backup will lead right into the first issue of the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But there's also going to be kind of a hiatus because of the Night Terrors thing happening.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
So the books are going to be interrupted for this event, kind of like a future state thing.
Gotcha.
So
ahead,
coming
Phil.
at it from your standpoint with it being a creator, how different is it to have, I mean, you're writing Action Comics and then you're over here doing, John Stewart. Those are two very different characters to come at from two very different worlds.
Yeah.
How tough is it?
It just takes some research and
Yeah.
it just takes some time. You have to devote the time to learn the character, to learning to love them, Because again, I came in this when they first talked about Green Lantern, I assumed it would be Hal. And then when they just for no reason except that's the one that I grew up with, and then I realized, oh, actually that makes sense. You want the army guy to do that, to do the
right.
Sure.
Yeah, which is funny because soldiers and Marines, you better not ever call a Marine a soldier, or vice versa.
I've
They don't like that. They don't like that at all.
Those are fighting words.
Yeah, kind of, and not in either particular direction. It's just everyone's all weird about it. Even within the army, it's kind of funny how that works. Like Marines think soldiers shit, vice versa. If you're whatever, if you're infantry, the drivers are crap. If you're airborne, the infantry's crap. If you're a ranger, the airborne's crap. Rangers and special forces are always slinging crap at each other, like we're better than you. There's all these rivalries. In the end, it's the camaraderie, supersedes all that. In the end, when the chips are down, there's camaraderie between all of us. But you won't see that at the Army Navy game.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So in your writing process, you're writing Action Comics. You've got the John Stewart story. You've got the Hulk over on Marvel. Do you, when it's okay, it's time for me to write, I got to write today. Do you pick and choose, like, okay, I'm in the mood to write the Hulk today because I've had a bad day and I want to write the Hulk? Is it something like that where you determine what character to write based on that, or is it easy for you to slide in and out of the voices of those characters and say, okay, today I'm doing this because I need to do this?
It's driven by deadlines, and it's not like I'm in a Hulk kind of mood. Comics are this train that never stops rolling, and it's a 2-mile train. There's only 4 miles of track at any given time. And so you're constantly like taking it apart behind the train and rushing out in front of it and trying to put it down before it rolls over you. There's this feeling of, there's this time sensitivity thing with monthly comics that never ends. And I'm sure it's the same with magazines and newspapers and everything else. I'm sure there's always this feeling of crazy rush that just never goes away. And sometimes the curtain drops and you get to see it, like some weird mistake that gets over the plate. There was I remember this is some years ago, maybe 5 years ago, but not long after I'd first kind of broken into comics, there was a printed discussion of a presidential debate or something that had happened the night before, and there were these big blanks in the article with like capital X's for like lines of X's. That was meant to be a quote from the debate, clearly, and they had pre-written the thing and just left out the quotes. They may have even written 2 versions, like, here's why it was such a success for so and so, another one like, here's why it went so poorly today. And they just somebody dropped the ball or sent the wrong draft and it got printed that way. And I just took one look at it and I'm like, oh God, I know exactly why that happened. Because you've only got 30 minutes to get that shit to the printer, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how comics are too. Every comic on the shelf, and you can quote me on this, every comic on the shelf that you've ever seen is one migraine away from not happening.
Oh, I can understand that.
They
I can
used
imagine.
to they used to in the old days, they would have issues that were already done and in the can. So if they were going to miss a deadline, they could pull this out as a filler issue and publish it.
Yeah, those still exist. I don't know if they're still making them or not, but that was my first thing at DC with an inventory issue. That was that exact thing. That's how they tried people out. I don't know if Marvel does or not, but DC did it. And of course, this is a long time ago. They wouldn't, every time they printed an issue, they had 3 or 4 like in the hopper ready to go. But now it's much more fly by seat of your pants. Like we're just barely made to the printer every time, and that's nobody's fault. It's just the nature of comics. Also, I mean, just look at how long it took to draw a page back then compared to now. The detail. Some of these guys doing work now, they're doing work like you'd see from a Dutch master of painting, like just unbelievable. Like Riccardo Federici, the guy Nick Klein, the guy doing Hulk with me. Some of the guys who got doing Superman lately, just
Liam Sharp, man.
Yeah. I mean, you can't do a Liam Sharp page in a day or even 2 days or 3 days. It's just an insane amount of work.
We had him on and we talked to him a lot about of his art and stuff like that. And I mean, he's just an interesting guy. And I tell you what, the stuff that he puts on page, I just actually read his Brave and the Bold the other day for the first time because I wanted to read it collected. And I mean, just looking at his art is sort of distracting because I don't want to read the story. I just want to walk through his brain.
Totally. Yeah. I remember an issue of Green Lantern he did with Grant, in which he's in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
It's this crazy, like Wizard of Oz, crazy landscape everywhere. Just like, that's not a monthly book. Like how do you do that? Yeah. I mean, how do you compare that to one of the old Golden Age books where, there's like that house style. It's just quicker,
Mm-hmm.
So
did
anyway,
you know that Liam Sharp drew Hal Jordan in an issue of the Hulk?
No, I did not. Was that during? Actually, wait, that does sound familiar. What was the situation?
It was a Hulk 426. It was a Peter David issue, and Doc Samson was running a mental ward, and it was after Emerald Twilight happened, and he didn't like what they did with Hal, so they made Hal, without referring to him as Hal, as a patient in the mental ward. And Liam Sharp drew the issue. It's
no shit.
Yeah,
I have to go back and look at that. I have some of those Liam Sharp Peter David issues. I don't think I have that one.
That's incredible. That's a nugget right there. That's great.
That is cool.
It's funny what you artists and you writers, the artists and these writers do these days, man. They just put those little things in there. It's great.
Yeah. It was when Tom King and I are friends. He lives kind of around here too. And when he was doing Mr. Miracle, there was a back when Kirby was writing, Mr. Miracle and all the New God stuff, there was this character. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a send up of Stan Lee, clearly meant to be Stan Lee, just to roast him because he had such animosity for Stan Lee back then. Just saw him as this shyster that was just screwing people over for money, and wrote him into the book just unapologetically, clearly Stan Lee. And when Tom did Mr. Miracle more recently, he put that same character in there too. And I think the guy actually says Excelsior at one point. He's playing with Mr. Miracle and Barta's kids. And
funny.
He's like mashing up the action figures, and at some point he says Excelsior maybe even at the camera. It was like pretty on the nose. It was super funny.
That's funny. I love when people do stuff like that. It's great. So besides John Stewart and Action Comics, you mentioned you're doing the Hulk. What else do you have on your plate?
Let's see. Action Comics, Hulk, which comes out June 21st. Green Lantern, War Journal is about to start. 007 for King and Country at Dynamite.
Excellent. I'm going to be down for that.
Thanks. Yeah. First issue came out last month. Next one's about to drop. Let's see. And I got a create our own thing coming together.
Oh, you do? Cool.
Good
I
to
do.
you.
What can
Not
you
for a
say?
bit. That's moving kind of slow. But we're getting it together. We got to find the right artist for it.
Cool.
I'm excited. It'll be like a kind of an Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips kind of crime story.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but with some kind of psychological thriller kind of elements to it. Kind of like Nightcrawler, the film.
Oh, okay. I remember. I know what you're talking
Some
about.
elements
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, it's going to be really fun. I'm really excited about it.
Now, do you have a publisher for that one yet?
I do. I'm not sure I should say yet.
Okay.
It's
That's okay.
still pretty early.
So we should just keep an eye out for when it happens.
Yeah, it's gonna be a minute. I might even talk to you again before that comes out.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
But yeah,
Because it's hard
I
right
got
now
a kids
because-
book I'm trying to get together. It's already written and largely drawn, but it's just me and a friend of mine. There's no money riding on it yet. There's no publisher yet. We're just kind of picking away at it. So I'm gonna try to get that made.
Well,
The same way. I got two of them put together that I just haven't decided what I want to do with them yet.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one is it's a little girl and her name is Spark and she goes on these little adventures and the book is titled Spark of Curiosity. And all she does
nice.
is go around and try to do little things like kids do. And then the other one's a
sounds dope.
little boy. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. So with you don't really need it in comics, but in the literary publishing, you need to get agented first. You got to find an agent for particular books,
Mm-hmm.
and they will kind of be the gatekeepers and get you to get their ins with the publishers and all that. So it's just another step that comic people don't have to mess with, really.
Kids' books are really popular now. Young novels are really popular too.
Yeah, it's important.
So the new Oath. Can you talk about the new Oath a little bit?
Well, it's an alternate reality, right? It's another world,
right.
and there's I write a lot of music into my books. That being my day job. Sometimes it's just melodies that kind of drift through the page, but more often there are lyrics, and or sometimes I'll write poetry, kind of like Tolkien stuff. I had this epic fantasy horror book at DC Black Label called The Last God, and I was hugely inspired by Tolkien's Middle Earth stuff for that. And I love how he would include little stories and songs and poems within the pages of his novels. It just made the world feel so much more real and lived in. It's just a concise way to build out the cultures within that world. And this is a whole alternate reality. It's another universe. I want to see things different. I don't want to see a place that looks just like ours, except for except Coke is called something else. I want to see something that's super different. And this is a world where we've already seen that the Guardians are gone. The central battery is gone. He rebuilt the battery as his sister, a living girl. And by the time we see these backups, she's presumably gone too, and everything's different again, and nobody knows where John is. And it just made sense to me. Plus, it always kind of bothered me that the oath is in English. It rhymes in English, knowing that these people. Presumably, there could be lands from other nations, let alone other worlds and galaxies, and wouldn't necessarily speak at all, let alone be speaking English. So I wanted to see a different oath. So that's what we did.
There was a time when every lantern had a different oath, and I always enjoyed that. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I feel like that's how it should be, kind of. I mean, it's good to give the reader something to kind of hold on to, give them like something unifying that ties the core together. But I recently found out about the lantern who doesn't understand the concept of light.
Oh, Rotlot fan, yeah.
Yeah.
And how there's that whole other oath that's all about sound. So I don't know. I think it's dope. So
there's also that lantern that's the math equation. Remember that one?
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah. Don't know what the oath would be on that one, but
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to see. Plus, I'm trying to give it this kind of old worldy sort of, feudal battlefield kind of feel to it. Like I want everyone to have their own armor or their own construct that they turn themselves into, and everything. I just want everything to be a little bit different. And I wanted to have to feel like this kind of joining of sci-fi and fantasy, the way that Star Wars is, kind of like that. There are elements of knights in armor, even though it's in the far future. Well, technically far, far away, but or in a long time ago, far, far away, but feels like a futuristic kind of thing. So I want to see that with the lanterns as well. And part of that, I wanted to have an oath that was in ABBA form instead of just AAAA like they usually are. AABB, like you sometimes see. I want to do something that was a little more old school that you might see in an old Lewis Carroll poem or Shakespeare sonnet or something.
One of the things, go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
I like the fact that you're making it your own in a lot of different ways, and that's really a cool take on what you're going to do moving forward. As a side note question for a fan, since you're talking about Tolkien a lot, if you're a Lord of the Rings guy, I got to ask, what about Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones, honestly, people crap on that dude for because of the ending of that show.
Yeah, they're not wrong. They're not wrong.
It's true. I know. I feel the same way. But his world, you can't fault him for his world building though.
No,
he feels so
huge.
real. Yeah, like I love how deep the deep dives go on that lore that he built. How there are things that I've always kind of missed in Tolkien's worlds that are in this one. Tolkien, of course, was a devout Christian. And one thing that you never really see in Middle Earth is like clashing of different religions.
Yeah.
There really was no religion to speak of. You don't know about the religion of the hobbits, the religion of the orcs, the religion of anything. Like there's like just the truth, the capital T truth that everyone kind of knows about. There's Iluvata, who is God, and there's the Vanar and everyone else. There's Valar rather. There's just these things that happened that everyone kind of acknowledges as being what happened.
Which is quite different from Game of Thrones because they had that religious twist in there. Right?
Depending on where you're from and what age you're in.
Sure.
There are different religions, and that's kind of how it should be, in my opinion. So they had all these different warring factions and clashing religions and like illegitimate kids and like all these different bloodlines, and it was just a much messier, bleaker world that honestly I really loved.
I felt awfully hard into Game of Thrones. I went and read all the books, and I started reading the World of Ice and Fire. I went back and did them all.
Well, not all the books, and you probably never will. At least not.
No, I never will. Probably never will get that last one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the publisher eventually will hire somebody to finish it. Like at some point they'll get all the dude's notes and they'll get somebody else to finish it.
Right.
But yeah, he's taking other work. He's doing other stuff. So I feel like he's kind of taking his eye off the ball as far as finishing that book.
I would agree.
So it happens. Also, I found out more about his supposedly I found out more about his workflow, and that he doesn't really outline. He just kind of writes from the beginning and just writes. And then when there's a roadblock, something doesn't work, he goes back and rewrites everything from a certain point. So he's, by the time, whatever, how many
one step forward, two steps back.
Yeah, over and over. Yeah. And so he just ends up rewriting page after page after page, just endlessly. So it's hard to get a book done in that kind of workflow. That's all secondhand. I don't know how I haven't seen him actually writing, but that's what I've heard. But we'll see. And plus, it seems like the book just keeps getting longer the longer he thinks about writing. Like it was supposed to be a trilogy, and then it's the world keeps getting bigger as he writes it.
I know.
The next volume has wheels on it. So we've kind of seen the Green Lantern Corps as space police. We've seen them as space sheriffs and so on. And you had made a comment recently about it. You were kind of looking at it through the lens of almost like Jedi Knights, which I thought was really a neat take on it.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. I want to see. I mean, I'm not going to pick apart this whole this long tradition of Lantern stuff. There's been so much great work, written, so much great lore written, but I do kind of want to see their powers stretch out a little more. Like I don't necessarily want to see them all in uniform. I would like to see them all in looking a little more unique. With different expressions of powers, with different cultures that they come from. God, what else? But yeah, just a feel that they're part of this super ancient tradition that's been around for a long time. Like they're servants of Rome, except Rome is just endlessly old, and we've seen all these advancements. How in Star Wars lore, there's kind of this history of the lightsaber and history of the Republic and of the Jedi Order itself, and where the Sith came from, and how that, the whole Order of Two thing, where that started. Like there's this whole like really long tradition of it. And I think the Lanterns could benefit from a little more of that. I flesh out some of that history. So I'm anxious to do that, but also just the feel of it, just the joining of sci-fi and fantasy is such a fun one. It doesn't have to be. There's different kinds of sci-fi, but sometimes it feels more Star Trek, a little too Star Trek for my taste, and not Star Warsy enough. I want to see more. I wanted to feel older while also feeling newer.
Back in the day, there used to be a book that was called Green Lantern Corps Quarterly, and so it would feature all these different alien characters, and it really fleshed out. I don't want to say fleshed out the lore, but it expanded it more than what we read in the normal book. And I always thought that was so cool because I was more interested in reading about. Sometimes we're interested in reading about some of these crazy characters that we only see in the background. They've got a story too, and there's so much lore and mythology that can be built up on that. I always geek out over that stuff.
Yeah, me too. That was one of the biggest. I mean, I am trying to keep it together right now and just focus on John and not get carried away yet and all the lore stuff. We'll see where it goes. I know Jeremy's also anxious to kind of branch things out. Jeremy's a great choice for the Hal book. He's just his energy is so Hal-esque.
Yeah, we got that vibe from when we talked to him. I mean, just he's really animated when he talks, and it's fun because he's. Well, I mean, to be fair, he even quoted it. He said he was like a geek boy, man. He's geeking out on this stuff, and he's so taken aback by what's come from what he's doing, and I don't think he prepared himself for the fact that these people want to talk to me, these people want to interview me, these people want me to sign their book, and he's taking it all in, and he's just loving it.
Yeah,
ride the wave. It's a good time, I'm sure.
Totally. No, he's a great choice for that book.
Yeah.
And, just talking to him, I don't know. We were kind of when I read I'd read his scripts earlier, but then when I finally saw the book with Zermanico's art and everything, we were talking. I'm like, man, your book is so fun. My stuff's not fun. He's like, your stuff's epic. Like, yeah, my stuff is fun. And it was just we both kind of like just sort of geeking out on each other's books. It's like, this is perfect for Hal. I was like, yours is perfect for John. Like, they should put your books. It's frustrating that your book is after mine. It's like it's gonna like yours better. Like, no, dude, they're gonna like yours better. It was just a really fun conversation. He just got a really fun energy to him. He's perfect for that book, and he's written Hal before, right? He wrote him in like an animated thing.
Yeah, he wrote 2 episodes of the animated series.
Yeah.
So between playing in the band for the Army and writing books, have you had a chance to do any conventions yet?
Yeah, I've been doing plenty of conventions. I mean,
cool.
I've been. My first printed book was like 2015. And I was at Boom Studios. I did a book called Last Sons of America, and then another one called Warlords of Appalachia. And those are both at Boom. That led to some more licensed stuff within Boom, but also Last Sons got noticed at DC, and Warlords got noticed at Marvel, and that kind of led to more stuff. So I've been doing cons. Even while I was trying to break in, I was already doing cons just to try to meet editors and publishers, and that's all that part of it. As far as tabling, I've been doing that too for probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Now I don't table a lot per se, mostly because of the whole day job and just, you got to get leave from the Army to do that stuff. And they've actually been very cool about it. Usually if it's just a weekend thing, it's not a problem. When it's something longer like San Diego, it kind of doesn't work unless there's, unless I can properly take leave.
Right.
But they've been cool about it.
It's sometimes harder for writers too, because you don't have like, here's some cool artwork you can buy, or it's a little bit difficult from that perspective.
Yeah, you don't necessarily make bank the way that artists stand to. But I bring a ton of books and I move those.
Are you appearing in any in the near future?
Conventions? Yeah, I'm doing San Diego. Beyond that, I'm not certain which ones I'm going to be doing. I'm almost always able to do New York. I should be able to do either New York or Baltimore, if not both, and those are both pretty close to me. Let's see. I just did MegaCon Orlando recently. Yeah, next one's San Diego, and then after that, I got to see for sure. I got to work out the schedule stuff with my Army gig.
I think the con got canceled. I think the con got canceled here, if I'm not mistaken.
Where are you guys? What con here?
I'm in St. Louis, Missouri.
He's in St. Louis. I'm in the middle of nowhere in New York. So I sometimes go to Terrificon up in Connecticut.
Yeah, people love that con. John Suntress of Word Balloon's a friend, and he talks that con up a lot. And I would totally love to do it. I don't think it's going to work out this time, unfortunately. But I'm only going to be in the Army probably a couple more years, and after that, it'll all get a lot easier. I can just do the cons that I want to do. Yeah, we'll see.
Cool. Well,
Cool,
when you do and we get a chance to meet in person, I'm going to buy you a beer
Oh, thanks, man.
or whatever. If you don't drink that, whatever you.
I do. Not a lot per se, but
No,
yeah.
me either. Me either. But
I'm the
Drink a
bourbon
beer,
guy.
I'll get the next one.
sounds good. All right, Philip, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. We want to check back in with you later at some point as we get closer to the launch of the book.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, please reach out. If I accidentally ghost you, I'm just drowning in work, so please don't.
Oh yeah,
Please
not
ping
a
me if
problem.
that happens.
Not a
Keep up
problem.
the good stuff, Phil, man. I'm really digging Action Comics. I'm glad you're on that title. I can't say that enough.
Oh,
I was
thank you,
so I was so sad that because Superman was what got me into the books back in this late 70s 80s, and I was sad when I wasn't because I mean Myron and I weren't reading a lot of DC stuff for a while because stuff was shuffling and this stuff wasn't jiving well, and I wasn't into things, and Superman took a hit, and I'm glad I'm reading it again. So
Thank you, brother. Me too.
great job on
He's
it.
launched me for you to read that book. And
I'm looking forward to the Lantern stuff, though, man. I'm licking my chops at it. I want some interesting stuff with Stewart. I mean, he's not my favorite Lantern, but I want to see what you're going to do with him.
thank you, man. I
That'd
hope
be
you dig
great.
it. One of the coolest things about this book that's out now is just the contrast, is how different those characters are.
Yeah,
Even the art accentuates that. Like the art styles are different. They fit their respective characters, and the writing does too. And I feel like there's a clear voice and vision for each of those two characters, and it shows how different they are. And I think that a lot of characters are going to come out of the book having a clear one that they follow and really love. So it's cool to be part of that.
yeah. You guys are going to be great on these books, man. It's just they couldn't have picked a better pair up for you guys. I mean, it's fun because him and Myron and I talked before when it was leading up to it. We didn't know who was going to be writing what and blah blah blah, this and that, and everybody's talking about the rumors and stuff. And your name come up a few times. I don't know if Adam's name came up until later, if I'm not mistaken. But at any rate, when it was real, I was like, yeah, that's going to be a good pairing on this. It's going to be a good time.
It's funny, like we do like fan casting only with writers and artist teams we want to see in books, right?
I do that too.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, take care, bud. Great
Yeah,
talking
man.
to you.
Yeah,
We'll
it's great
have
to
you on
talk
again soon.
to you. Thanks for having me on.
Best of the family, Phil.
Thank you, brother. You guys too.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of
All right, Myron. Oh man, I'll tell you what, just talking to these guys, listening to their stories, Johnson's he's a cool character, and it's really cool because relatable with my older son Gabriel, they're both in the service, and thank them for what they do, for everything that they do on any given day for this country. But just I don't understand how he finds the time.
Yeah. You can tell, he's busy and juggling a lot of things. It's interesting to see the contrast between Jeremy Adams and Phillip Kennedy Johnson, and the contrast between Hal and John. It's interesting. It's a very similar dichotomy. It was fun, but definitely a different kind of interview for us than I think we've done before. But I really enjoyed it. I had a good time talking to him, and I feel like their story types, their storytelling is different too. That Jeremy is definitely doing the Hal on Earth, Green Lantern on Earth with the Earth stuff, and kind of ignoring the rest of the Green Lantern Corps. And then you've got Phillip Kennedy Johnson over here with John doing the cosmic stuff. And to me, it's like the best of both worlds. So
yeah, they're really they're working well off one another. Not only working together, but they're working well off one another.
Yeah.
And I think their personalities are really going to do them justice when it comes to their characterization. And I've often wondered, and I probably should have asked both of them this, looking back on the interviews, but I wonder how much of their writing reflects some of their own personal stuff. You know what I mean? Because it comes through whether a writer wants to admit to it or not. Everybody has their own unique little way and their own little niche and I've always been curious whether them guys do that or not.
Yeah, I can't imagine that their real life circumstances don't impact the writing in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
But I'm really looking forward to where things go. One of the things we did get out of Johnson was not only the confirmation of the title, but that while it's been being kind of advertised as a limited series, it doesn't seem like it might not be a limited series depending on responses. So that's a good thing.
I don't think it's going to be limited. I mean, you need a good counterpart. You need another Lantern book besides just one. I don't think I don't know DC's plan, so I don't want to. I would imagine at the point they're in now with since Jim Lee is president and everything like that, I would imagine they want to try to do some style of books that kind of gear towards, certain genres. So John Stewart's an important character. You can't overlook it. Just for him being an African American character alone.
If I were Jim Lee, I would make the John book its own standalone book.
Yeah.
But I'd give them each a backup. They'd either tie in together or two separate backups. And I know people want to see the other Earth Lanterns, but why not focus on the Alien Lanterns or the Corps itself? You could have I know some people would kind of rant on the fact that you'd have to buy two books to follow one story if the backups were intertwined, but I'd still rather see that than just, go back to reduced number of pages or even expand the number of pages. I like, there was a time when there was a Tales of the Green Lantern Corps backup, or there was an Adam Strange backup. I always enjoyed that because it was, you felt, even though you weren't getting necessarily more pages, which you are here, but you didn't feel like you were getting gypped in any way. You felt like you were getting added value, and it made you interested in the other characters. And I think that's partially, this is to kick off what's going on with John Stewart. I'm not sure why they're going this route and not just launching it as a book. That's some strategy that DC has, but I would really kind of like to see them do something with the backups and give both those books backups, whether they're completely different stories and you focus on, maybe Kyle's a backup in one book and Guy's in the other, or whoever, or rotating.
You could even do, I mean, if I'm a writer, and I don't speak for these guys, but if I had the chance to write a character like this, and they were giving me the book, I'd be like, okay, well, I want to do it, but at the end of the book, I want to have 2 or 3 pages of a different type of Lantern story, and you could even just do it like a little sub story, like tales from whatever, and just have a 2 or 3 page splash of whatever Lantern you want, you know, it's Rainer, Gardner. And you can even have a common one. You could have Tales of Kyle and Guy, and they could be going on their little lantern. I don't know, anything you want, being creative. Sure. I think it would do it justice. But you never know what DC has planned. Keep in mind too, like where all the lanterns are right now is kind of up for grabs since the United Planets are in charge, and our little blue jerks are nowhere to be found. So
they're on sabbatical.
We don't know where all the lanterns are right now. So maybe down the line, they got something that's gonna lead up to it. So never know, they could set their footprints. But I'm looking forward to a John Stewart book. He's not my favorite Lantern, I'm going to say that, and I've never been a huge fan of John Stewart, but nobody's ever written him to really attract me. So Johnson may do so. I mean, I like the first little tidbit I got, but I need some more.
Yeah,
I'd like to read him in a standalone book. That's what I'm looking forward to.
I thought Van Jensen did good with the character. I think John's, I think originally the plan was for John's to have Hal and John kind of co-star in the Green Lantern book, but I don't know this factually one way or the other, but I think that the response that DC was seeing, they were like, no, we need to give Hal the spotlight because right now he's getting real hot. So but whether that happened or not, who knows? And we'll probably never know.
Time will tell.
But yeah, no, I think that, like I said, Van Jensen, I thought did a really good job on his run on Green Lantern Corps. Obviously, I liked some of the stuff in the 80s. For me, I didn't like it when they added the whole military aspect to John. I thought they took away what made him a unique character. And when I watched the Justice League Unlimited and the Justice League cartoons, I felt like, well, they've basically made John Batman without any of the interesting parts. He was the tactician and so on, the military guy that could lead a charge and come up with a great plan, but there wasn't much else there. And maybe I missed that. Maybe I'm wrong.
And like Johnson said, and you don't want to be heavy on that anyway, because you don't want that to define the character. And I could do without it thrown in my face all the time. I don't mind the tidbits here and there. I mean, it's the same thing with Hal Jordan when they do they throw back the Ferris aircraft, and when he does his little test pilot runs and stuff like that, it pops up here and there. I mean, that's part of it. So it's the same thing with John. I don't mind if it's here and there, it's coming in, but I trust in John. I mean, Johnson's doing a knockout job on
Mhm.
Superman, so I think he's going to do a swell job with John Stewart, and like two very different characters to write. Let alone he's writing the Hulk too, right? He's writing
Yeah.
the Hulk over at Marvel.
I just feel, I don't know. It's been a while since I felt this way, but I feel comfortable. I feel like,
Energized.
well, yeah, energized, and I trust both of these guys to do right by the characters.
Yeah.
I just do. There's something about them, and it's their character, how they convey themselves. I just think they're going to do a great job, and hopefully fans respond to it. That's all we can ask for.
That's all we can, and just so them guys know, we're going to buy their books. I'm behind them. I'm going to support them in the writer's strike too. So, I'll be picking these up.
So we have another episode to do this month. It is Jail May, which is the crossover event amongst a number of different podcasts. This time around, they are going through, and we participated in Blackest Night a couple years ago. This year, it's a review of the Brave and the Bold series, and you and I are doing it says Green Lantern and Green Arrow, but it's not. He's not really teaming up with Green Arrow in this story. Right. But it's part 3 and part 4 of a 4-part story, and part 1 and part 2 are being done by our good friends in the Lantern Cast. So you and I'll record it, but we'll make sure to release it after they release theirs, and it'll be a neat little tag team of the Lantern podcasts in this event. And we are actually talking with them about maybe doing a Green Lantern centric event for June. I haven't talked to them about it, but I think we should call it GL June.
I like it. GL June.
So we'll be back probably in a week or so, maybe a little bit longer, to talk about the Jail May stuff and do the Brave and the Bold stuff. Plus, we have this shiny new issue we need to be talking about too. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thanks everybody for sticking around and bearing with us while we try out this video format. It will get better. Trust me, we will get better at it. It just takes a little time. We're both 2 middle-aged guys that are still figuring it out as we go along.
You're going to say we're going to get uglier. The better the lighting gets, the uglier we get, right?
Right. I like to say I look better in the dark and grainy, So until next time, treat each other well, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. All right? Take care, guys. Thanks so much for watching this Green Lantern video from the blog of Oa. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find even more great Green Lantern videos, reviews, podcasts, and more at our main website, www.blogofoa.com. So until next time, keep your power ring charged and make every day your brightest day.